Namaskar, I Vishwarupa Rath welcome you all to Uday India Digital. Today I'll talk about the growing menace of grooming gangs in the United Kingdom. Recently, the Rishi Sunak government in the UK announced a task force to tackle the growing problem of grooming gangs in the country. Sunak said that political correctness should not result in sexual offenders evading arrest, while his Home Secretary SuellaBraverman singled out British-Pakistani men for the organised crime. UK's Home Secretary SuellaBraverman took the UK by storm while speaking to a Sky News. We see a practice whereby vulnerable white English girls, sometimes in care, sometimes in challenging circumstances, being pursued, raped, drugged and harmed by gangs of British-Pakistani men who work in child abuse rings or networks. The UK Home Office clarified that she was talking about the three most notorious grooming gangs from Rochdale, Rotherham and Telford. For the uninitiated, the Rochdale, Rotherham and Telford cases are three high-profile cases of child sexual exploitation by grooming gangs in the UK. The Rochdale case involved a group of men who were convicted in 2012 of trafficking and sexually exploiting young girls, some as young as 13, in the Greater Manchester area. The case drew attention to the issue of grooming gangs and the lack of action taken by authorities to protect vulnerable children. The Rotherham case involved the sexual abuse of an estimated 1,400 children between 1997 and 2013 by predominantly South Asian grooming gangs. A report by Professor Alexis J. in 2014 found that the abuse had been enabled by a number of institutional failings, including a lack of action by the police and social services. The Telford case, which came to light in 2018, involved the grooming, trafficking and sexual exploitation of hundreds of young girls, some as young as 11, by predominantly Pakistani grooming gangs in the Shropshire town of Telford. The abuse was reported to have been ongoing for over 2 decades. All three cases highlighted the systemic fallings of the criminal justice systems and other institutions in protecting vulnerable children from sexual exploitation by grooming gangs. The cases led to public outrage and calls for action to address the issue of grooming gangs, including better training for law enforcement agencies, greater support for victims, and improved coordination between different agencies. Grooming gangs are a serious problem in Britain that have been causing significant harm to young and vulnerable individuals. These gangs consist of groups of men who deliberately target and exploit children, particularly girls, for sexual purposes. They use a variety of manipulative tactics, such as offering attention, gifts, and even drugs, to gain the trust of the victims and then coerce them into engaging in sexual activity. The issue has been particularly prevalent in some of the country's most vulnerable and deprived areas, and has been a disturbing aspect of the social fabric in the UK. The grooming gang phenomenon has been particularly troubling because of the scale and severity of the abuse that has been taken place. Many of the victims have suffered from physical and psychological trauma, and some have been subjected to repeated sexual assault over a long period. Furthermore, many of these gangs have been operating with impunity for years, despite the concerns of local communities and law enforcement agencies. The disturbing nature of grooming gangs in Britain has brought to the forefront important issues surrounding race, ethnicity, and religion. Many of the perpetrators in the gangs are of South Asian, particularly Pakistani or Middle Eastern descent, which has led to accusations of racism and Islamophobia. However, it is important to note that the issue is not about race or religion, but rather about exploitation of vulnerable individuals. The impact of grooming gangs on the social fabric of Britain has been significant. It has caused a breakdown in trust between communities as well as between communities and the police. It has also led to a rise in far-right extremism, with some individuals using the issue to further their anti-immigrant and anti-Muslim agendas. Moreover, the issue has caused significant harm to victims and their families, many of whom have struggled to come to terms and what has happened to them. There have been some attempts to address the issue of grooming gangs in Britain, but progress has been slow. In recent years, there have been a number of high-profile cases that have resulted in convictions, but many more cases have gone unpunished. There is still a need for effective strategies to tackle the problem, including better training for law enforcement agencies and a greater community engagement. In conclusion, grooming gangs are a disturbing aspect of the social fabric in Britain that have caused significant harm to young and vulnerable individuals. The issue is complex and requires a multifaceted approach to address. It is important that efforts continue to be made to tackle the problem, both to bring justice to victims and to rebuild trust between communities. With this, I wrap up this edition. For more such analysis, subscribe to Uday India.